As accountants, we like to help people and we want to be there for them. Sometimes it's important to know where to draw the line and where you can help somebody so far, and then they've got to also put their bit of effort in as well to be helped.
Today's guest is Izzi Rosenberg, chartered accountant and founder of ProsperFi. Izzy isn't just doing the books, he is turning ledgers into decisions and showing directors how to plan and spot trouble early and obviously protect cash. Izzy, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I like to sort of go into the backstory to find out a little bit more about who Izzi Rosenberg is. And I saw one of your posts and it talked about you started with an engineer's mindset and then you sort of doubled down into accounting. So could we sort of go through of, well, who is Izzi Rosenberg? How did he start? What happened? And how did you end up here today?
Yeah, so...
condensed into about 2 minutes.
Fair enough. So Izzi Rosenberg grew up knowing that his dad is an accountant, not knowing much what an accountant does. Granddad was an engineer and his big brother was an engineer. And I really got drawn to engineering. I loved what my big brother did. I really liked engineering. I liked the way how engineering can find solutions to problems, invent new things, be creative in all different ways. And I was really drawn to it, and I wanted to be an engineer. But I also saw how my dad helped people with their finances and how he managed to change lives and quite possibly saved lives even from giving people clarity over their finances. And I was drawn to that too. So I was thinking well, what if I can bring the engineering side of it into the finance side of it? Because there are common aspects of it. It's a bit like, see, engineering and finance is a bit like doing a jigsaw puzzle. You've got to put all the pieces together and then you create a picture. And it's the same with engineering, it's the same with finance. And that's where I got into finance. So I started off asking my dad if he'd give me a training contract, and he said no. Then I went to work for a local firm near where I lived. I worked there for a bit, and then I went on to a mid-sized firm in central Manchester. Learned a lot there, really enjoyed it there, and my dad asked me if I'd come and work with him because he wanted to plan an exit, and I said no. But I noticed how cloud accounting was coming in around 2017, 2018, and I was quite drawn to it. And I spoke to quite a few of the mid-sized firms thinking maybe I can help them adopt this cloud accounting, bring it in, and none of them seemed majorly keen or interested in progressing with it. So I realised the only solution I've got is if I go back to my dad and say, yes, I'll be willing to work with you, but we need to bring this into your firm. So he agreed. We went in, and the firm was very old school. It was stuck in the 80s, very manual, very paper-based, and completely turned it around to the point where we brought it into a modern-day accounting firm, which I would say was probably in the top 10% of digital adoption. And then eventually my dad retired, and that's what brought me to set up ProsperFi, going further into what I wanted to do, and that would be bringing financial clarity to business owners.
What did you like about working for sort of a mid-tier firm in central Manchester?
I liked, firstly, the client base that you get exposed to. So often when you work for smaller firms outside of the city centre, you'll be dealing with very micro clients, so it could be tradespeople, taxi drivers, the people who haven't really necessarily got a business. But once you go into a bit of a bigger firm, you're dealing with people who have more of an established business, they've got goals, aspirations, they've got a bit of different mindset, and you kind of get to see past that limiting factor as, oh, we can only get to X or we can only do Y, and there's suddenly that they're enabling things and things are happening, they're getting places, and you can see actually we can get places. We're not limited by whatever circumstances that surrounds us.
And obviously going sort of into your dad's firm that, like you said, was, you know, in the dinosaur ages really. So how many people were in your dad's firm when you went there?
There were 3 of them, including my dad.
How did you get them to adopt what you were talking about? Because that must have been a real challenge.
Well, you've heard of the pandemic. That solved the problem for me.
I suppose it forced everybody to adopt these new ways, didn't it?
Yeah, it did, but also the people that were working with him were reaching retirement age, and they didn't feel comfortable coming into work, so it meant that they would have to adopt remote working, which again they just weren't comfortable doing. They couldn't get their head around it, and they voluntarily decided that enough's enough. You know, they were going to retire within the next couple of years anyway, so they just decided that they were going to just retire from there.
And when you sort of set up ProsperFi, what was the thing that drove you to sort of make that? Because that's a big decision, isn't it? And you set it up just after the pandemic as well, so that it was like a time where, you know, it's a bit of a ballsy move, that.
Well, what I found is that I noticed how a lot of accountants get very drawn into trying to be the most technical person they can be, and spending a lot of time and resource finding a solution that may only help a client once in a lifetime, when really clients, business owners need an accountant for every single day, and that's what they're screaming out for. But the problem is these accountants are spending so much time and resource on that once in a lifetime tax strategy that they haven't got the capacity to be there every day. And I felt, well, I want to be that person who's there for them every single day. So that means working with fewer people, but doing more work for them. And being more specific in the services that we offer, rather than just being a supermarket.
Yeah. I think you get it. We really understand that insolvency, so we will. So it's not as much a unique selling point anymore, because we feel like a lot of people have sort of followed our lead on this. But if you go back a number of years, most insolvency meetings, and you might have been in somewhere, they would have a chap come in with a briefcase, with a black overcoat, pretty stern, and they would just quote the insolvency director, who is under huge amounts of stress anyway, and they don't really understand what's being said to them. And I've noticed you've talked a lot about explaining things in plain English, and that really jumped out at me, because we've got to be able to explain to people what are the problems, what are the solutions in language that they understand. So that sounds like this was a thing that you took into your new venture. I'm gonna bring in finance for directors in a manner that they can understand. What have been the biggest challenges for you since starting ProsperFi?
It's an interesting one, that I'd say often, as accountants, we like to help people and we want to be there for them. Sometimes it's important to know where to draw the line, and where you can help somebody so far, and then they've got to also put their bit of effort in as well to be helped. And there also are aspects where people may try and push the boundary. You may have committed to take on the scope of service being over here, and then they'll try and push the boundary to there. Now, that's fine, the boundary can move up to there, but obviously then there's a separate agreement that needs to be had. And really, to expand that agreement, and obviously to call a spade, it basically means quoting for it and making sure it's paid
More
for
money,
as a business. But the reason why, actually, if that doesn't happen, and the boundary and the scope of service, the service level isn't expanded in terms of with the costings and everything, the person that loses out the most is the client, because all what happens is that it drains the firm's resources, and then the firm becomes tired, as it were, and it can't service them as well. So if we make sure that we're quoting for every piece of extra work, and we're doing that means that we can give them the quality that they deserve, the timing, the consistency, and everything that they should have.
I mean, I'll talk from my experience. I remember when I first set up, I would take any job on. Like, literally, if somebody had a problem, I was desperate for work. I was like, wow, yeah, I've got somebody's going to take me on here. They're going to put the faith in me. And, you know, like write a quote £4,000 plus that for an insolvency, and that's not £4,000 worth of profit, but I would be on their beck and call, and it was like sort of a client demographic that we don't really work with as much anymore, because they just took up so much time, and it was constant extra calls, and but at that time I felt like I had to take on every job, and to a degree I'm glad I did, because it helped me learn what I didn't want in a client going forward. But it took a while to get to that point to go, you know what, we don't work like that anymore. You know, having the guts to say we're not a good fit, because that's one of the things I always like asking people. What are the red flags for you? Because not every person that picks the phone up and goes, Izzy, I need some help, is going to be a good fit for you, are they?
No. Well, there's one definite red flag, which I have heard, believe it or not, I have heard a few times over, where prospects on the phone would say, you know, my business isn't really established yet for me to have the money to pay for an accountant. When I have the money, when my business is established enough to have the money, I'm willing to pay lots of money for an accountant. But right now, I just need that advice. And it's like, okay, are you actually saying that? Are you just that straight away? I mean, if you can't part with some money today to get the service that I'm offering, then very little chance that that's going to happen again in the future.
Mm-hmm. I do think people who are very price conscious from the off as well, they're always going to be difficult. In my experience, that they're difficult clients. If they're like, knowing me, it's like, and I've taught our advisors, if somebody rings up and the first thing out of their mind is, I want a quote for liquidation, you've got to say, listen, that is a big red flag for us, because what they're doing is, listen, we can quote someone to go into insolvency, say £5,000 for a basic liquidation, but we know on a lot of insolvencies, it's never going to cost £5,000. There could be assets, there could be actions against the director post-appointment. And it's those that are like, no, we literally just want a quote, we don't want to hear anything else. You know, what we've been taught them to do now is say, listen, we're not a good fit for you anymore. You might be better, you know, we'll send them some stuff we've done on YouTube to try and help educate them about. I think we did a video that we did popular that says, you are not looking for a quote for liquidation. But it's like, and I think those people, they see us as a cost, and I think that would definitely be the same for you guys, is they're looking at you as a cost as opposed to an investment and there's a big difference there, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when people ask that question first off, they don't necessarily mean it in the way of like, all I care about is the cost. Sometimes they just don't know what questions to ask. Mm-hmm. So there, it's a bit, a fact finding is saying, okay, fine, but looking a bit deeper into it, well, what is it that you actually need? Where are you at? What are your goals? Why did you set up in business to begin with? What are you wanting out of this business? Are you looking to exit? Are you looking for it to run smoother? Are you looking for it to be more profitable? But find out what's the why, what's going on there. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you will get your tire kickers who are fixated on price, and that's it. You're not going to change it. That's fine. Then obviously we know we're not going to get anywhere. But there are some people, once you start having these discussions with them, you realise that it's just the only question they need to ask. And then you can get talking to them more. You can understand a bit more about it. And to me, I always find it's that a price is only you're only looking at one aspect of it, but it's about the value, what you're getting for what you're paying. Mm-hmm. And if you're just going to come across asking the same questions as everybody else, what's your turnover, how long you've been in business for, and just very bland questions that don't really get them thinking about future or where they want to get or their aspirations, then the only thing that they can do to compare you to the other person that they're speaking to or the person that they're going to call up next is price. However, when a conversation starts getting into more detailed things and things about their goals and aspirations, the chances are there's not many people asking them that level of detail. You're right. And then price isn't really a comparable anymore.
I think, starting with the end in mind, I think Stephen Covey might have wrote that in the, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but that is a really interesting question to ask directors. I've never had an accountant ask me that. You know, it's like, I think it's important. There's because you are a chartered accountant, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
If someone called you an accountant, how would you feel about that? If they just pigeonholed you as an accountant?
I'm not really bothered.
Okay.
But
you're more than that, aren't you?
I'm more than that. I'd say I'm more than a chartered accountant as well, because there's nothing, with all due respect to all the exams that you go through, and they are very hard exams. It's a level 7, it's a master's, it's only one down from a PhD. I'm not trying to push myself up there, but I am.
This is the platform to do it, is it?
There's nothing in those exams that teaches you anything about client communication. There's lots about ethics, which is important. There's lots about the technical skills, but there's zero about how to communicate it with people.
I think where I wanted to direct you as well is like, people have a huge misconception of what an accountant is, and there's different types of accountants, and and again, like as insolvency guys, we will hear this all the time. We ask, what's gone on, what's the problem? Oh, it's my accountant's fault, they never talk to me. I'm like, okay. I says, I always need a balance sheet. Show me a balance sheet. Show me where your business is at today. He says, well, the only one I've got is 18 months old. That's my last set of accounts. I'm like, well, you're not, where's your management information? How are you making decisions on this business? And they don't, I don't know if it's they don't realise. I'm sure the accountants definitely mentioned it. But they have this idea that their accountant should do everything for them, but they're only paying them £300 a month. I think it's that there's so much, they don't understand what a compliance accountant does,
yeah,
and what you guys do. And that's what I really want to dig into today. You know, we've got an accountant, we've got a bookkeeper, we've got a fractional finance function. As simply as you can you sort of explain the three things and what each one does a little bit differently to the other?
Yeah, sure. So an accountant and bookkeeper are functions that are, for lack of a better word, technicians. So a bookkeeper will post invoices to the system, reconcile banks, and a certain level of journals. So trying to avoid the technical terms here, but bits that would adjust the accounts, the accounts to balance them off. The accountant then is involved more in the tax compliance, statutory accounts, and any other aspects that come up within company law. Let's say not company law, not going into lawyers' territory, within the accounting side of it. And UK taxation. Then becoming the fractional finance team, that's more, well, think if you had a finance person in the house and they were focused all day long about how much tax you got to pay or what's your VAT, and just firefighting, making sure the VAT returns are in and all that, but not actually looking at any management information, so not taking any consideration for what your margins are other than just to make sure the accounts balance every year. Not looking at what our costs, what does it cost us to keep the business breathing? So I always think, like, if you think about like a business like a human body, if the revenue and the direct costs, effectively that's like the beating heart of it. So if that heart was to stop, how long does it take before the body shuts down? Mm-hmm. Right. So if you think about the overheads, that's like then the flow of blood going around the body, that kind of idea. So those overheads it's important to know that, because if you need to make sure that you've got enough gross profit to cover those overheads, plus the required profit and tax that's going to be on that profit, to then make sure the business owner is getting out what they need out of it. But a standard accountant isn't necessarily looking at that. They might maybe look at it once a year or something, but they're not necessarily considering this on a day-to-day basis. A bookkeeper certainly isn't getting into that, because that's quite technical. Mm-hmm. So this is where this whole entire full finance function comes in. It's almost like having a finance person in-house, but on a fractional basis. So on a fractional basis means you don't, as a business a certain size, you don't necessarily have the need to take somebody on full-time. And it also comes at quite a cost, because obviously, you consider the salaries of these people, then pensions and national insurance on top. Whereas here, having a fractional finance team means that it works better than having part-time, because we're available 5 days a week, but only giving as much as your business needs.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the block a lot of people have in their head, isn't it? I mean, the first thing is they don't really know what they don't know. They think with an accountant who does the books once a year and a bookkeeper, they've probably got everything boxed off. But you're right, you're sort of looking at old information, aren't you?
Yeah.
There's not much. I mean, one thing that I know really trips directors up that I've dealt with is, let's say they've had a business that's run really well for years, it's been profitable, it's been able to give them what they want personally, but they start to have difficulties, and whether it be COVID, cost of living crisis, that I think the economy's in the toilet at the moment. But what they still need to withdraw this sum of money out of the business to cover their basic living costs, and they don't have any management information that's given to them. And at the end of the year, they've ended up with a really big overdrawn loan account, and they can't quite understand how this has happened. And it's because they're almost running a business blind, aren't they? If they don't know what their burn rate is, they don't know what they need to extract out of that business. And if you start with the end in mind and going, right, if you need to take X, I don't know, 50 grand a year for you, 50 grand a year for your partner out of the business, we've got to be doing this on a monthly basis. And there's such a big gap in the market, because some accountants, they don't, what you're talking about, they don't even want to do that service. That they are very happy being that sausage machine that just brings in client after client after client, produces a set of accounts, and perhaps doesn't think about them again. So where would you sort of start with if somebody says, right, Izzy, please come in, you have some questions, you go through, these are a decent fit for me. Where would you start with them? What would be the routine you would get a director into if they was working with you?
Well, the first thing is to understand the long-term plan, because a long-term plan isn't built overnight. So by understanding the long-term plan, that then plays part of the short-term plan. So if you speak to somebody and they might say, well, I started my business 5 years ago with because I wanted to retire at the age of 60 and then get enough money from the payout from my business that I could then live for another 30 years without having to worry about money. Or they might say, well, I want to be able to do that then I can do a consulting role that won't earn me as much money, but I've got I'll have a nice bit of a pension from starting this business. There's lots of different things that they might say. So once you understand the end goal, then we can reverse engineer it. And it's like, okay, so you could be speaking to somebody right now who's 40 years old. So they've got 20 years to get to that point where they want to exit. So let's reverse engineer it. What does your business need to be worth to exit at that price? And then what do we need to do to get the business to that value? And that's when you start looking at short-term goals. Now, we could be a million miles away from it right now, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. Mm-hmm. But if we don't plan anything, we're never going to get there. Then we need to look at short-term goals. Right, okay, fine. Well, what do you need out of your business? How much do you need to live off? Obviously there's basic living costs of how much they just is non-negotiable. Everyone's got to have a place to live, food to eat, and things like that. There's some things you can't do without. And then what's a nice thing? So you might be living in a 3-bed lane house now and want to move into a 4-bed detached. Mm-hmm. So that could mean that you need to have another £200,000-300,000 on top, which not necessarily you're going to take out your business. You'll be looking at maybe getting a mortgage for it. But what does your business need to earn so that you're able to get a mortgage for that? Mm-hmm. And it's these kind of conversations. So now that we've determined, right, okay, fine, your business, for you to be able to get this out of your business on a comfortable level, your business needs to be making a profit of X. But then we need to add on top of that a buffer, because your business needs to have a bit of retained earnings, a bit of spare money, for putting it into simple terms, that if something didn't go to plan, something didn't happen, we're not coming to you in the first instance. That's when you then go further down the reverse engineering line, and you look at, right, okay, fine. So then, if the heart of the business stops beating, how long is it going to take until the business shuts down? So what's the overheads cost? How much do we need on a month-to-month basis to cover these overheads? Now, say a business needs 50k a month to keep all the staff paid, to keep all these costs going. Right, great. Okay, so that means that then we know where we need to sit with the gross profit. So we need to make sure that our margins are giving us at least that just to cover overheads. Plus, we've got to add on the profit you need for the directors, for the shareholders, directors. People often get mixed up with those terms, but let's just put it in simple terms for the business owner to get what they need out of it. But actually, as a side point, what the business owner needs out of it, their salary and a market rate salary, whether that is more or less than what they're realistically taking out, should always be put as part of the business running costs.
Of course, yeah.
Because,
especially if they want to sell.
Yeah, because the business owner needs to look at it is if they were to step out of the business and to put somebody in their place doing exactly what they do, how much would they need to pay them? And whatever that comes to, that's how much they need to factor in for their own, whether they're taking more or less than that. But again, going back onto this, but once we've understand what the cost of running the business are, plus the desired profit for the business owner, or what the profitability may need to be for them to get that mortgage so they can upsize house, whatever it might be, you're then able to determine how much the profit margin they need, based on gross profit. So the turnover, sales, minus the direct costs. And that's when you can start looking at that. So the sales and the direct costs, obviously the sales is what it is, wherever you set, the more you sell, but the direct costs also play a big part into it, because what you want to do is you want to broaden the gap between those as much as possible. Sometimes broadening the gap can have a bigger impact than increasing your turnover, and that means sometimes if it's a matter of finding cheaper suppliers, having things run more efficiently, whatever it might be, it can maybe sometimes without you even having to sell more, you can suddenly be making a lot more money.
Because that's it. People think the answer to my problem is more sales. But if your profit margin shot to pieces, it's just going to exacerbate the problem, isn't it?
More sales is very important. I think it can't be underestimated, right? Because without any sales, we can have the best profit margins in the world. But if we have no sales, then there's no profit margin. So it can't be underestimated, but it does need to come along with getting a good margin.
Got to be well thought out, hasn't it? And I think just that conversation that we've just had, like there'll be people watching this and going, I've never done that. Like so many business owners, they're on a back of a fag packet at best, And I think a lot of people, they're not business owners by mistake. It's like, I read a book called The E-Myth once, Michael Gerber. It's a great book, and it talks about most business owners are technicians. They are very good at what they were meant to do. It could be a plumber. They were fantastic plumbers, but they were no good at sales, they were no good at marketing, they were no good at HR. And like if you are really good at what you do, you will get work. And sometimes they'll grow into this business owner and thinking, crikey, how did I end up here? When do you think a business owner should be starting to go, you know what, I need to start building this finance function? Because there'll be people out there who are going, yeah, really good idea, I like the sound of it, but I'm only turning over X amount, therefore I don't need this.
I think they should do it from the minute they start the business.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Very realistically speaking, from day one, it's very possible that they won't have the affordability for it, which is fine. But they should at least leverage off things, free resources that are available on the internet from the right places that can help them build that function to the best of their ability. And even, there are people who do, like myself, who offer this service, who would technically, in theory, be willing to sit down for a power hour and give people the tools they need to do this, to then leverage and come back for maybe more support on an ad hoc basis at a later date. Those tools are available. you know, you can give it a self-serve model. So this is how you do it yourself. But when you're big enough and you're ready for it, you come back to us and we'll look at giving you more of a service. I think the other thing is, you know, you were going, just to go back on what you were saying a few minutes ago, where some people blame their accountants, say, oh, my accountant's messed up and all that. And it's a very easy cop-out. It's, if you come across the
we
concept...
don't believe them when they say that.
You come across the concept of or bed. So OAR or BED. So you're either above the line or you're below the line.
I've never...
So OAR stands for ownership, accountability, responsibility.
Okay.
It's with two Ds at the end, but it's blame, excuses, denial, and drama.
Okay.
So the bed sits below the line or is above the line. So when you're faced with an issue, what is your immediate response? Are you taking ownership, accountability, responsibility for it? So, yeah, my business is in a mess. I've taken far too much money out. Do you know what? I own it. It's my business. I take responsibility for it. I didn't keep on top of the numbers. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't listen to the advice I was given. My accountant was rubbish, but I didn't replace him with a better one. All these kind of things. Or do you go and you say, it's the accountant's fault? Or I was too tired, I was working so hard, I was flat out, I had no headspace to do it. Or you deny it, say, there isn't any issue here, absolutely fine. Or drama, you just run into a frenzy. So, as a business owner, if you want to have a successful business, you need to be an adult in this and take the or approach.
Mm-hmm. No, I've never heard that, but I like it. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of denial, especially when things are going into, things are difficult, you know. And I think we're sort of conditioned to be positive and we'll get through this and yeah, you know, all the personal development out there and things will turn around. But I think that can really hinder somebody in a time of crisis in the business. It's like you've got to see them as they are. Not worse than they are, not better than they are. But the problem is if they've not got a function like you're talking about, it's really hard to make that call with any accuracy because all they're looking at is, I've got HMRC letters piling up every week that I can't pay. I don't want to speak to suppliers. There's absolutely no financial information bar a set of accounts that they did 12 to 18 months ago. And it's like, I think that admitting that you've got a problem is really bad as well. Like it's, I mean, we talked off air, like people will sometimes follow us for months and months and months before they actually pick the phone up and go, listen, I've got a real problem. Because if you admit it, there's a problem, when you're an owner managed business, I think you get all that pride, you know, that ego. It's like, oh, I am a failure. This will get better. This will get better. It's like, you know, and it's sad for a lot of people because they don't have anyone to talk to about this. And like, again, it sort of highlights why what you do is so important. Because at least, I mean, what would be the cadence of like you speaking to directors if they work with you? How regularly are you touching base with them?
Some of them every day, or even multiple times in a day.
Okay.
And that's not necessarily, it can be picking up the phone, but often it's through text, WhatsApp, emails, and be multiple conversations. And I get it, because for business owners, I'm a business owner myself, so it's a lonely place. Who do you talk to? You can't speak to your team because you don't want to give them warning triggers that they think their job security is at risk. Again, you don't want to speak to your suppliers. You don't want to give them any warning triggers, and certainly don't want to speak to your customers. And some people don't even want to speak to their partner.
Listen, I get it. Yeah, they really don't want to talk about it at home.
No, it's sometimes. Well, there's various aspects of that. Sometimes partners just don't understand it. They could be an instance where maybe they might feel a bit insecure in their relationship if they show financial insecurity. There are other aspects of where maybe the partners too, if they've got kids at home, some partners just too stressed to be able to listen and hear it. And again, who said the partner's a financial advisor? Mm. So why should the partner be giving you finance advice?
Mm. No, I get it. I mean, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was when it comes to directors, it's like they think it's about reporting. I'm sure I read somewhere that you mentioned this, that they think finance is about reporting. What you're saying, it's about decision making. It's a runway to decision making, and I like that. But can we pick into that and sort of pick it apart? What did you mean by that?
So the typical example is when a typical example of an accountant who will try and step in out of their accountant shoes and get a bit more into that advisor space. So they'll be like, right, so we'll do management accounts. So what they'll do is they'll take the year-end accounts, chop it into 12, and say, here's 1 month, there we go, here's a report, and it's got all the numbers you want, and we can see what your trade debtors were, and I can give you all these cool ratios and everything. And the client sat there thinking that they must be stupid because they don't understand half the things that they're talking about, but they don't want to say anything. Mm-hmm. And they get these accounts. It's not very nicely printed. It may be printed out, maybe bound, or maybe if they're a bit more in the space, it might be on a PDF, on a portal or an email. And all it does is it just goes to the bottom of the drawer, or whatever the digital equivalent of that will be, never to be seen again. And they don't have any information that they need out of it, nothing. What you really need is you need a dialogue, a conversation, because I might have been looking at somebody's set of numbers for the month, and I'd be like, right, we've had something's got an unexpected increase in sales this month. What's gone on? Has it been that maybe you've had some orders that people would usually put through in 2 or 3 months' time that have come in now, which means we're going to see a dip in 2 or 3 months' time? Has there been a new customer you've taken on? There could be a whole variety of reasons, but you don't necessarily know that without having these conversations. But it comes into a dialogue, because, like I say, if it's not just simply a matter of someone saying is, oh, the sales are up because this customer who usually comes in January has decided they want to order in November. Mm-hmm. Because you then now need to continue that dialogue and say, right, well, what's your plans for January? Are you putting this money aside? Are you fulfilling these orders before January? If you're not fulfilling these orders, then we really need to have a conversation about, well, it's not really November's turnover. So if we want to be measuring profitability, we need to have a think about how we're going to recognise that and where we're going to put it.
I mean, just what you've said there, like, even for me, and I'd like to think I'm financially literate, but having somebody ask you, they're quite tough questions, aren't they? And I can imagine as a director, do you get a lot of pushback sometimes and thinking, God, come on, Izzy, be a bit more positive?
I'm always positive. I am cautiously optimistic.
I love that saying, yeah.
So a bit of a personal experience of mine I've had in the last summer. We had some hospital experience with one of my children, ICU, and we had to face some difficult conversations with doctors. Thankfully, everything's okay. It's all good. But I remember at the time, 2 months prior to that, I'd gone to an accounting expo, and there's a guy who I know, I'll quote his name, Ashley Leeds, if he's listening at all. He was wearing a t-shirt that said, "What's the best that can happen?" And that was a huge shift in mindset, because everyone always goes, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? And so when I was suddenly, it was really unexpected, a young baby suddenly thrown into ICU in front of these doctors, very senior doctors, and they're coming with the whole team around them. It's quite daunting. And I said to him, "Doctor, what's the best that can happen?" And that really threw him. Yeah. And it was that mindset that just gets you through places, and actually, the best that can happen did happen. So people are always thinking, so in finance, people always think worst case scenario very negatively, but no, you don't have to. You have to be cautious about it. You have to be aware of it, right? So we're not going to go and buy ourselves a yacht because our imagination tells us that we're going to get £10 billion of sales, right? But we can be optimistic about it. We can think about best case scenarios.
I just always think it's good balance, that, because like most entrepreneurs will be quite optimistic, positive, and you've got to have someone sort of pulling on those strings a bit. And actually, I mean, like me, I think just because of the nature of what I've been in for years, I'm really cautious about things. It's like, a lot of businesses I see that have failed, it's not that they were bad businesses. They just didn't pace the growth. They just ran too quickly. They thought, that's what it's about, isn't it? Grow. you know, we all want profitable businesses that grow year on year, but you've got to be careful. You know,
it can be circumstances as well. I mean,
of course.
What's that? Is it Filofax? That I don't know, remember that company that used to make those diaries?
Filofax, I've heard of Del Boy Filofax. Yeah.
Right. Who's ever heard of them now? Right.
No,
So
yeah.
They no longer have a place in the market. So
Blackberries.
Right. So if say a business like that it becomes insolvent, it's through no fault of their own. It's the market has shifted. Well, there is what to say that they could have moved with the market trends and all that, but let's put that aside for now. It's not all necessarily about poor decisions always. There's sometimes things like businesses who would have been affected by COVID, no one could have ever predicted that. So I think, but though the thing is that as difficult as these things might be, it's always an opportunity for new beginnings, and new beginnings can bring positive outcomes. So I suppose it's like if you had to make a non-performing employee redundant. In fairness, you're doing them the best favour, because it might sound difficult at the time. They're going to have to face not having a job or whatever it might be, but actually, if they were to continue doing what they're doing, not performing in their role, they're going to drag the business down. Someone like you is going to make them redundant when the business goes insolvent, and also is that in that time they're spending precious months of their life not performing in their careers, whereas making them insolvent then gives them making them redundant then gives them the opportunity to go and find the role that's right for them and go and give them the challenge they need.
And then correct things. No, I get it. But you know, you've worked in a whole different type, you know, practice, family practice, doing what you do now, mid-tier firm. What is the most expensive decision you've watched a business make?
Good question. I'd say TV advertising probably.
Do people still do that?
It was a long time ago. It was a very, very expensive bit of TV advertising, but it did wonders for them, and they got it back.
Really?
Yeah.
You see, that's another thing that I think that's so important with what you do is people will spend money on marketing and have no grip of where that money's coming from. They don't really know how to budget. It's like, well, I'll try something over a bit, I'll try something for a month, sort of thing. How much do you get involved with that side of things in a business, marketing, sales? What are you looking for?
I will encourage businesses to go into marketing, but I always say to them it's got to be strategic. So if you're going to, as a business, marketing is very, very important, because if you don't have some sort of exposure or some way of drawing in your customers, then you don't have a business. So what people need to recognise, though, is say if you're going to get somebody to come in and do your SEO, if you're going to go around shopping on price and you're going to get somebody who charges you, say, 200 quid a month, if that's even possible, but they do a shoddy job of it and they don't get your SEO, they don't get you anywhere, then you've wasted £200 a month. However, if you're going to spend, say, £3-4 grand a month for somebody, and they get sales in multiple times that what your spend has been back in through it, then it's money well spent. So really, you've got to think about what is the value in it. So the value being is how much am I getting out of it minus what it's costing me. So where's my break-even point? At which point am I breaking even on the spend, and at which point am I getting into profit? And obviously, you don't want it to just get you a little bit of profit, because then it's not worth the effort. You want it to be doing very well for you.
I think, I mean, that's a really interesting point that you've made. Like, people are spending on, I mean, I've worked with multiple agencies over my career, and I would get reports back saying, well, we've had this many impressions, we've had this many conversions. I'm like, yeah. I says, how many sales have we had?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like people would say to me, yeah, but we're gonna the cost for the lead has come down. I'm like, I don't care what that cost for the lead is, right? I'm happy to. I had to work out what I wanted my cost per acquisition to be. You know, it's like on a basic level. Let's say that there's £5 grand. I mean, you don't really make much money on really small jobs, but let's say you're selling something for £5 grand. There is £1,000 net profit in there. how much of that £1,000 am I willing to spend to acquire that client, you know? And I had to learn about that as a business owner. It was like, I mean, it was embarrassing, but back in the day, like I literally was that guy who'd go, right, well, my business is, my costs are about there, I'm bringing in about this, we're going to be okay, you know, and like I used to spend money on, and back in the early days, we had to spend a lot on marketing. I mean, we still spend a lot on marketing, but it's just part of your ecosystem, you know. We spend paid ads, we retarget people, we put tons of this type of content out because we want to get in front of people. But, you know, on a weekly basis, we're looking at every campaign. What has it performed? What is the cost of that lead? How many of those leads have gone out to a proposal stage? How many have we contacted? How many have we not contacted? How many have been junk leads, sort of thing? And that, we could perhaps do it on a daily basis, but it's like having that granular level of detail has helped us make better decisions in that business. So do you get into that with people, like on a what's like a, is there a dashboard that you'll give a director going, this is what we need to be tracking?
Well, the in-depth conversations about, you know, how they're getting on with the marketing, that would be more conversations for them to have with the people that are doing the marketing for them. The tracker and the dashboard would be more from the financial aspect and an overview of, right, okay, fine, what do we need to get in every month to be profitable? Now, what we need to be conscious of as well is that businesses don't necessarily run weekly, monthly, whatever it is. I often find that it's good to keep on top of things regularly, but as far as measuring numbers, sometimes when it turns into the actual, you know, the conversions, the sales and things like that, sometimes you've got to look at a quarter, because a quarter has enough variety in it. If you say, take for example, you know, July, August, September quarter, you can't really necessarily get a full month out of all those, because August everyone's on holiday, September's back to school, July end of term. If you go then to October, November, December, again you've got December's Christmas, November can be very busy because people are buying in for Christmas, so can October. So it's really a quarter gives a good insight into things.
I think, but the key thing is you've got to be tracking it, haven't they?
Yeah.
You know, whatever it is, you've got to be measuring. So, like with you, like, and you do this sort of incomings and outgoings. What are the key metrics that you're looking for in that business, or what are the key metrics you want that director to be focusing on? Because, like you say, there's 101 reports that people could be looking at. What are the bits that really move the needle?
Where the margins are at. So as much as you can increase the margins, that's going to flow down to your bottom line. We want to see is there a turnover growth. So, you know, based on what we were saying earlier, that some you know, the business owner wants to sell in 20 years' time, and therefore they need to grow their business on a consistent level over the next 20 years to get to that point, or even if it's to upsize the house in 3-4 years' time. Again, that also they'll need to increase their business by a certain point. So what we need to do is we need to break it into bite-sized steps. So that means that we need to have sales growth every single month over the next however many years to get to that point. Because you don't just go from, say, £2-3 million turnover to £20 million turnover like that. Right? It takes time to get there. So incremental steps, organically, and just consistently doing it. And looking at, you know, if they've taken on an extra cost in their business, whether that's a new employee, bigger premises, whatever that might be, are they getting the return on investment that they want out of it? You know, so if you've taken on a new employee, doesn't necessarily just because the turnover has gone up by the amount that you're paying them, doesn't necessarily justify what you're paid. You know, because obviously there's gross profit involved in there, so you've got to work out what it costs you to sell. Plus also is that if you're just breaking even on taking on that new employee, was it worth it? Yeah, you may as well just not bother with the responsibility and stay as you were. So you've got to look at, well, what changes in the business have you done, what were you expecting the outcomes to have been, and then what are they actually going to be. But then it's also very important for people to realise that they need to be flexible as well, because very often the outcome is very different to what you anticipate it to be. It can be better, it can be worse. And if you get fixated on trying to get it exactly how you've predicted it to be, you're probably spending far too much time looking at the numbers and not enough time running the business.
Well, this sort of leads me on to sort of one of our closing questions as well. Is there like a basic finance routine you could give a director that's watching this now? You know, what should they be doing on a weekly and monthly basis?
Firstly, know what you need to turn over every month to stay in business. Keep on top of it through the month. Don't just wait till the last week of the month and start panic selling or trying to reduce prices just to get deals in. Start it right from the start. If your target's too easy and you're reaching it too quickly in the month, it might be time to raise that target. If it's too difficult and you're just not hitting it, you need to have a realistic conversation with yourself again. Next thing is make sure you're profitable on everything. Look at a 13-week rolling cash, so 3-month rolling cash flow forecast. So effectively, making it very simply, what have you got in your bank account right now? How much do you expect to come in over the next 13 weeks and at which dates? You split it down to weeks. And how much do you expect to go out? And effectively, if our starting balance, say, is £50,000, we're expecting to have in in the next week, we're expecting, say, to have in £100,000, but we're going to have £90,000 going out. That means your net increase in your bank balance is going to be £10,000 increase. So basically, you've had a £50,000 starting, 100 grand in, 90 grand out, you got £60,000.
And you can spot the problems with the cash flow, can't you?
You can, because what you might find is that in week 3 or 4, say in week 4 where your wages are being paid out, you might have a huge cash outflow, way more than you're getting coming in. But then what you need to do is don't get too excited in the earlier weeks when you see your bank balance getting too high. Make sure that you build up slowly so you're prepared for it, and we've got the money to pay the wage bill and on for the next month.
What are the biggest problems you're seeing at the moment with businesses? What's blindsiding business owners at the moment, sort of late 2025?
Lack of visibility, I think. Despite all the cloud technology that we've got, despite everything, there's still people who are walking around blind. They don't understand properly what they have available to them, what's going on, estimates, things like that. Sometimes I think, I'd say within our profession, sometimes we're we're very well trained in accuracy, which is a very good thing. But what we need to realise is when it comes to management information, accuracy isn't the core focus. It's about drawing a line in the sand, giving some sort of guideline. And no one's going to hold you to the numbers. If it doesn't work out exactly as you spotted out to be, as long as you've got reasonable calculations with what you come to, reasonable estimates, you've not overstated things, you've not blown things out of proportion or overly optimistic or overly pessimistic, that's fine. But just some sort of guideline is what people need.
Izzy, it's been a really, really good podcast. It's stuff that I've learned from stuff today, and that's what I always judge it on as a barometer. So it's been a real pleasure having you. Where can people find out more about you? Where can they go to? And we will have everything in the show notes, but for those that are listening in the car.
Yeah, so I'm quite active on LinkedIn, on Instagram, TikTok, and also have a YouTube channel as well. So
I hope we're going to see more postings on YouTube.
We will see more postings on YouTube. So my postings on YouTube is on my name, Izzy Rosenberg. My LinkedIn profile, again, Izzy Rosenberg, but it's spelled I-double-Z-I. So whichever way you spell it, turn it inside out, upside down, it always spells the same name. TikTok and Instagram is ProsperFi_accountant, or our website, www.prosperfi.co.uk. So it's ProsperFi with an I at the end. And if you look through our website, there's contact details there.
Izzy, thank you. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.